Daniel chapter 2, the dream of a king. How many of you guys read ahead? It's very difficult not to keep going. It's very difficult not to read like one and then keep going. 3, 4, 5, 6. Next thing you know, you're there. But 2, we've always heard the story. And tonight we'll be able to take it apart a little bit. It is very important. Now remember, the first 7 of them that we go through, the organization of the book, historical, they're talking about actual events that happened. Tonight's going to be Nebuchadnezzar's dream. You'll notice that about 2 verses in, when I tell you this is what it is, because we're reading English, but it switches from Hebrew to Aramaic. And from chapter 2, verse 3, all the way to chapter 7 is not written in Hebrew. It's written in Aramaic. So when you hear folks say, well, the whole Old Testament's written in Hebrew, it's not completely true. This is the part that's Aramaic. So we'll pick up on that as we keep going. Nebuchadnezzar's dream. You're going to pick up a couple of things here that we have heard in other prophecy points, especially in the New Testament. One of them being the times of the Gentiles. The reason for that is because Nebuchadnezzar is the one where that phrase starts. And it's because of Jerusalem. It's because that's where the temple is. This is when the Gentiles overran the city and the temple, because up until then they were a complete nation until Assyria had come down, but Assyria only went halfway. This is when Babylon came in, conquered Assyria, so they went that halfway, but then they kept going and conquered the rest of it. And it wasn't his dad, it was him that did it. So that's why Nebuchadnezzar's dream begins this time of the Gentiles. Luke 21:24 talks a little bit about that. And they shall fall by the edge of the sword and shall be led away captive into all nations. And Jerusalem shall be trodden down of the Gentiles until the times of the Gentiles will be fulfilled. So the Jerusalem being overran by Gentiles will be that way until the Antichrist is conquered. And it will be Jesus is the one that's conquering him and ending it. So when you see these disputes and arguments about Jerusalem, this peace agreements and all that kind of stuff, you've got to realize that verse right there still stands. The times of the Gentiles is not going to end until that Antichrist comes. So they can cut all the deals they want, but they won't have control over that city until Jesus comes back. Even the Temple Mount, that's kind of what they're arguing with right now. We'll talk about that a little bit as we keep going. Now this chapter that we're going to go through tonight, it's actually considered the backbone of all of the prophecies of Daniel, and also all of Daniel being the backbone for prophecy in general as you go through it. Anything that you're reading about prophecy, it will connect to Daniel, whether it's 9, 11, 13, even this one. So this one's very important to pick up what's important. So we really got to get a handle on this one. So we're going to begin chapter 2, Nebuchadnezzar's dream, 2 verse 1. Now in the 2nd year of Nebuchadnezzar's reign, Nebuchadnezzar had dreams, and his spirit was so troubled that his sleep left him. And then the king gave the command to call the magicians, the astrologers, the sorcerers, and the Chaldeans to tell the king his dream. So they came and they stood before the king. All right. This is the 2nd year of Nebuchadnezzar's reign. So he's had these guys 1 year. Now he's just coming to grips with this Babylonian Empire and his part in it, right? He was coming up from the south when he'd got news that his dad died. All of a sudden, guess what? You're in charge of all of the Babylonian Empire. So he's had these guys for a year trying to get a grip on it. He inherited them. So, as some of us do, when you're thinking about things, what's going to happen? What's going to be in the future? What's going to be? This is kind of what he's doing. He's sitting there, laying there on his bed thinking, well, what's going to happen with the Babylonian Empire? I mean, I just took this over. I'm a young, successful general. Oh, thanks, Dave. A young, successful general. This guy's won many battles, so he's got a real feel for what's happening as far as military. But now he's in charge of the entire empire. he starts to dream these dreams. You'll notice that the way it's worded, some people think that it's actually one dream that he dreamed many times. Have you ever had one recurring dream? So when this starts to happen, you're a little bothered by it. What is this? Now this, in particular, we're going to find out was something that God's right in the middle of. Now, he knew that this dream was impressing enough on him that he knew this thing was something important. This meant something. This wasn't just a I ate bad sushi kind of dream. He knew this is something. So that's why he brought these guys in. Now, as you're going through this, one of the questions is, what was the source of these dreams? Because when you have dreams, you're dealing with things that seem extremely real. Have you ever felt like, man, that was real? It was, tangible almost. You could almost taste and feel and hear the things that were inside the dream. Well, all of those kind of things are something that we might even be dealing with even in the spiritual. And it seems more real because it is. Yet, here we are in the body when we wake up. So the question is, who gave them these dreams? What was the source? And the subject. What was the subject? What made him think, yeah, this thing's really important. This is something I need to pay attention to. Now, I was going to answer them here, but I want you to chew on those two as we keep going. Dreams. This is not the only time that God has given somebody a dream to do something. But today, there's many people that God talks to them. It even says in Joel, and later on in Acts, it says that there's going to be men dreaming dreams in the last days. But there were other dreams. Remember in Genesis, the Pharaoh had a dream about the 7 fat cows and 7 skinny cows. And Joseph was there to interpret it. We're going to have 7 good years, and we need to store up for the 7 bad years that we're going to have. Isn't Joseph and Daniel 2 of the guys that nothing's bad said about them? It seems interesting how God's sticking certain people for these interpretation of these dreams. There was even a dream that God gave the Magi to go worship Jesus. Remember that? In Matthew? So dreams are something that come around. Psychologists tell us that 90% of a person's free mental time, the time that we just kind of browse, mentally we're just cruising, that it's not time that's specifically dedicated to any specific activity, but it is spent wondering about our past, or is spent worrying about the future. And Nebuchadnezzar, no different. He's got all this pressure and stress and things that are going on, and he's going, man, what's going to happen? What's going to happen? What do I need to do next? And then these dreams start surfacing. All those terms that you saw there, the Chaldeans, they're all leadership. They do different things, but overall, they overlap quite a bit, and it basically boils down to the people that they would lean on for leadership. Maybe some of it was stars, some of it was necromancy. There was all kinds of stuff that had came out. Remember, Babylon, originally, it began with Nimrod. Nimrod, the Tower of Babel, that's where a lot of our stuff, all of our pagan things that we see people worshiping today, it all has its root back in with Nimrod and Babylon. So these guys are just carrying on with it. All right, so we'll keep going here. In verse 3, and the king said to them, I have had a dream, and my spirit is anxious to know the dream. Then the Chaldeans spoke to the king in Aramaic, O king, live forever. Tell your servants the dream, and we will give you the interpretation. Now, right there, from 4 on is all Aramaic. And it's interesting when you start seeing the things that are talking about Gentiles, it flips to a Gentile language. When it starts talking about Israel again, it goes back to Hebrew. So there's no mistaking that God's in the entire chapter. From Nebuchadnezzar's perspective, all right, he's successful. I've done all this stuff. I come home. What do I get? My father's group of advisors. Now remember, he's been with them for 1 year. So after 1 year, he starts questioning, does he trust these guys? I mean, you're going to start seeing a test emerge. And as it's worded in here, decide for yourself if you think, did he do it on purpose? Or was this something he actually thought? Like, if you were thinking about this, you ask yourself a question, did he really forget the dream? I mean, we got dreams. Man, I had this dream, but I can't remember. Okay, was it one of those? Or did he command to tell him the dream as well as the interpretation as a test? So if it was a test, Nebuchadnezzar, remember, he was a great military guy, so he's great with strategies. So if he remembered the dream, he knew it and had something to do with the Babylonian kingdom. So he goes, let's just weed these guys out. If you are and you can do who you say you are and you can do the things you can do, then you'll be able to tell me the dream and what it means. And if not, we'll just fire a bunch of people off with their heads. So he dives in here. Verse 5. The king answered and said to the Chaldeans, my decision is firm. If you do not make known the dream to me and its interpretation, you shall be cut into pieces, and your houses shall be made an ash heap. Now, I did put the King James Version up there. You notice, see where it says, the thing is gone from me? That's not in the New King James. So, these are important pieces. So when I come across them, I want to kind of, write them down so you can see them, so you can kind of make notes in your Bible or whatever, but that's definitely missing. So, one of the things I started to notice here was that when we see things like cut you in pieces, I think we are so desensitized by Walking Dead and whatever else is out there, we're hacking people to. So when we start saying, oh, I'm going to cut you to pieces, we almost don't even think about it. It's like, oh. If you'd say that term to a group of people, even that mixed company, that's not a thing we would say in mixed company 100 years ago. Oh, cut them in pieces. Oh, that's terrible. But today we just kind of go, oh, what? Cut them in pieces? Oh, okay. And it's like we're starting to get so desensitized. Think about it. That's a pretty serious thing to tell a group of people. Give me this answer or I'm hacking you up. And you start, getting a visual on that and you think, that's motivation. I better figure out what's going to happen. So this king, he wants to be able to trust these people that is teaching him something, telling him something. Can you imagine if we believers started to at least apply that much where we cared about what someone was telling us? We will get something, I don't care if it's on Facebook, internet, whatever, we'll repeat something and not even check it. Oh yeah, this happened. And then you go, oh my gosh, that never even happened. Well, this guy is going, I want to make sure this is accurate enough. I'm going to tell you. If you can't tell me, I'm hacking you up. That's how much I want to know what the fact is. All right, so in 6. However, if you tell me the dream and its interpretation, you shall receive from me gifts, rewards, and great honor. Therefore, tell me the dream and its interpretation. They answered again and said, let the king tell his servants the dream, and we will give its interpretation. The king answered and said, I know for certain that you would gain time, because you see that my decision is firm. If you do not make known the dream to me, there is only one decree for you. For you have agreed to speak lying and corrupt words before me until the time has changed. Therefore, tell me the dream, and I shall know that you can give me its interpretation. In 10, the Chaldeans answered the king and said, there is not a man on the earth who can tell the king this matter. Therefore, no king, lord, or a ruler has ever asked such things of any magician, astrologer, or Chaldean. And I got to thinking about this. Even the world understands what's happening here. When you see this and it says, there's not even a man on the earth who can tell the king this matter. See, they're even looking at this going, that's just not possible with men. So they're even acknowledging that God's awesome. Anything's possible. All these things are possible with God. Therefore, no king or ruler has ever asked any such thing. Absolutely. They understood there wasn't any man on earth, was there? God. God knew that. And then he even said, no king or lord has ever asked any magician, astrologer, or Chaldean. Absolutely, they knew that because you wouldn't know. That's why they said that. So they understood that. There's things like this when people that are not godly are saying these kinds of things. Caiaphas, remember when they were going to stone Jesus? And before it was all starting to go down, he's trying to justify what's happening with these other guys around him. And he said, it is expedient for one man to die for the many. Well, he's talking about we need to get rid of this guy so that we can, come together. But he didn't realize how much truth he was actually speaking. It's expedient for Jesus to die for the many. That's actually why he came. And again, that's absolutely true. So 11, it is a difficult thing that the king requests, and there is no other who can tell it to the king except the gods whose dwelling is not with flesh. Well, you got that right. Isaiah is a scripture that refers to this. Present your case, says the Lord. Bring forth your strong reasons, says the King of Jacob. Let them bring forth and show us what will happen. Let them show the former things, what they were, that we may consider them, and know the latter end of them, or declare to us things to come. Show the things that are to come hereafter, that we may know that you are gods. Yes, do good or do evil, that we may be dismayed and see it together. See, God's telling these people, kind of like he told Job, you think you're so smart? Tell me what's going to happen in the future. And that's kind of the reference that they're making here. You can't tell you something that's going to be happening out there. Sure you can. Sure you can. God will. All right. So 12, for this reason the king was angry and very furious and gave the command to destroy all of the wise men of Babylon. So the decree went out and they began killing the wise men. See, it already started. They began killing the wise men, and they sought Daniel and his companions to kill them. It's kind of like calling number 42. And it's like, oh, wait, hold on. So then in 14, then with counsel and wisdom, Daniel answered Arioch, the captain of the king's guard, who had gone out to kill the wise men of Babylon. He answered and he said to Arioch, the king's captain, why is the decree from the king so urgent? Then Arioch made the decision known to Daniel. You notice how he says, with counsel and wisdom. See, God was walking with him from the very beginning. So when it came down to it, he's working with God's wisdom here. Should I say something to this guy? So he starts talking to him. So in 16, so Daniel went in and asked the king to give him time. Notice who he asked? He didn't go to the first guy. He went into the king. That's bold. The king just put out a decree to kill all these guys, and he walks in to talk to the king. So Daniel went in, asked the king to give him time that he might tell the king the interpretation. Then Daniel went to his house and made the decision known to Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, his companions, that they might seek mercies from the God of heaven concerning this secret, so that Daniel and his companions might not perish with the rest of the wise men of Babylon. Now you read this and you go, oh, man, this is a great man of faith. And you start thinking about it when we're doing it, when we're going through something. The very day tomorrow we go out, we see a personal something that's going on in our lives, and after trying to do it on our own, we default back and start praying as a last resort. Oh, well, I guess there's nothing better. I guess we better just pray. I've already tried to do everything I could do on my own, and that didn't work. Oh, well, let's try God. Where this guy, right off, he says, this is what we're going to do. They're going to pray. And you realize that even with these guys right here, they didn't have some committee. They didn't put together some task force, group of elders. They didn't put anything like that. It was 4 guys that they believed in God, and they knew each other so well that when he went in, he said, hold on, king. Give us a second, and we'll bring you the interpretation. He made a commitment for the other 3 guys. He didn't go ask them, hey guys, would it be all right if I went and told the king? He was already so in tune with those guys. He told the king. He went in and said, guys, we need to have a prayer meeting. And that's the way it boiled down. The Holy Spirit was so in tune with those 4 men that as they moved as a unit. And it was Daniel that happened to be the one that was talking with them. So Here he is going in there, seeking the mercies from the God of heaven concerning this secret, so that Daniel and his companions might not perish with the rest. So here they are, they're seeking them from God. They're going, what are we going to do? Then the secret was revealed to Daniel in a dream, in a night vision. So Daniel blessed the God of heaven. You notice? He, sleeping, it comes to him. He sees the same dream. And then God shows him exactly what's going on in the dream. He wakes up. What's the first thing he does? He starts worshiping God, starts saying, thanks, God. I don't know how many times I've seen people pray, God answers a prayer, and next thing you know, they act as though they had it the whole time. And you look at that and you just think, you have been seeking God and fasting and asking people for prayer for a very long time. It shows up, and the first thing that happens is the answer to the prayer that you just got suddenly takes you away from God somehow.
Lord, fix my car. And then you go out and hug the car.
And you don't go back to church all of a sudden because now that your car's running good, you go find things to do instead of being in church. So add that to whatever it is, kids and houses and whatever else comes down the pipe. Okay, so in 20, Daniel answered and he said, blessed be the name of God forever and ever, for wisdom and might are his. Man, I tell you what, if your head was on the chopping block and he just gave you the answer, there'd be tears streaming down your face. And he changes the times and the seasons. He removes kings and he raises up kings. He gives wisdom to the wise and he acknowledges those who have understanding. The thing that we don't understand is that he removes kings and raises up kings. What does that tell you? He gives us the leaders we deserve. All the way back to Nebuchadnezzar. If these guys would have been doing what they were supposed to be doing, would Nebuchadnezzar have come in? Wouldn't have happened. It just wouldn't have happened. What was the one you called, Dave? Saul. When remember, they had judges, and they were led by God, and they had judges to rule with the other matters, and they said, we want a leader like the other nations. I don't know if you ever saw this. I didn't see this until Dave pointed out. They said, we want a king like the other nations. I always took that like, we want a king. They got a king, we want a king. That's not what Dave was pointing out. It's awesome. We want a king like the other nations. A flawed man that's going to screw us up and get us into a mess. And what did he tell them? There, you got a king like the other nations. He's handsome, he's tall, he's an idiot. Yeah, you got him. That's what you wanted. And where did it get him? In a mess. And you look at this and you think to yourself, our own president.
I was just going to say, I bet Saul could read speeches off of the teleprompter. Nobody's doing.
I'll bet he could. We get into this red team and blue team so much that we don't even realize it has nothing to do with the red team, blue team. It's the heart of the red team and blue team that is creating the mess, because 2 Chronicles 7:14, if our heart was right, then we would all be right, and then the people that we would be voting into whatever offices would be right, and then the ones we voted. So I mean, it's a trickle-up effect starting with our heart. We get what, see, and we keep going, more and progressive and liberal, and what do we get? And I have not heard one person, and I mean very few preachers even, will stand up and say, church, it's our fault. Make no mistake. Stop blaming that guy in the Oval Office. Oh, he's a bonehead. But the problem is our hearts, because it says, if my people will, not the world, my people, God's people, who are called by my name. We're called by his name. So just like this, it says, he removes kings and raises up kings. For what purpose? Well, we see what's happening here. It's time for some correction. So now in 22, he reveals deep and secret things. He knows what is in the darkness, and light dwells with him. That's awesome. Light dwells with him. I thank you and I praise you, O God of my fathers. You have given me wisdom and might. You notice how he doesn't take any of this on himself? Now remember, go back. How old was Daniel? He was about 17. It took him 3 years to go through their little training leadership program. Now he's going through the let's make sure that you're genuine testing program for their leadership. So what is he now? 21? 21, 22 years old? So he's 22 years old or so, and he's saying, you have given me wisdom and might. I mean, that is a heavy thing to put on somebody 21 years old. And have now made known to me what we ask of you. You have not because you ask not. This guy's about ready to lose his head, and he goes, God, can you give us the answer? And he gave it to him. God answers prayer. For you have made known to me the king's demands. All of the wise men of the most powerful empire of time couldn't even pull this off, could they? The guys that had been with his father for who knows how long, they couldn't pull it off. So in 24, therefore Daniel went to Arioch, whom the king had appointed to destroy the wise men. Again, that's bold. He went in and said thus to him, do not destroy the wise men of Babylon. Take me before the king, and I will tell the king the interpretation. Then Arioch quickly, I'll bet, brought Daniel before the king and said thus to him, I have found a man of the captives of Judah who will make known to the king the interpretation. Who found him? Really? You're kidding me. I have found. Daniel didn't bother with that. He said, all right, whatever. So the king answered and said to Daniel, whose name was Belteshazzar, are you able to make known to me the dream which I have seen and its interpretation? Boy, am I. Daniel answered in the presence of the king and said, the secret which the king has demanded, the wise men, the astrologers, the magicians, and the soothsayer cannot declare to the king. But there is a God in heaven who reveals secrets. And he has made known to the king Nebuchadnezzar what will be in the latter days. Your dream and the vision of your head upon your bed were these. Now this is very valuable information. What was the purpose of the dream? He just said, God in heaven who reveals secrets. And he says, what will be in the latter days. That phrase, with a couple of others, is going to keep repeating itself all the way through the Bible. Because it keeps talking about the latter days. Latter days. Latter days. Remember, we're talking about 600 years before Jesus. Roughly speaking, 2,600 years from now. Backwards. So, latter days is what he's talking about. So, what is the latter days? If you want to make notes, if you're making notes, I'll leave it up there. If you're not, then I won't worry about it. When you start talking about the latter days, the Old Testament and the New Testament talks about it a lot. And that's the reason why Daniel chapter 2 is the backbone. Because this is where you start adding the other pieces and start understanding exactly what it was that he was talking about. If you need those verses, I can email them to you or something. Verse 29, as for you, O king, thoughts came to your mind while you were on your bed. You realize what this guy is saying? I'm telling you what you were thinking while you were asleep in your private room. That would be very disconcerting. As for you, O king, thoughts came to your mind while on your bed about what would come to pass after this. That's what the subject matter is. And he who reveals the secrets has made known to you what will be. Who is the source of the dream? God. God gave this man the dream. So God is completely in control of this whole situation. But as for me, this secret has not been revealed to me because I have more wisdom than anyone living. Consistently he's going, not me, him, not me, him. But for our sakes, who make known the interpretation to the king. So I don't lose my head. God gave me this for our sakes, so I don't lose my head. And that you may know the thoughts of your heart. You, O king, were watching, and behold a great image. This great image, whose splendor was excellent, stood before you, and its form was awesome. In 31, where it says awesome, the King James Bible uses a word called terrible. The King James uses terrible. New King James says awesome. Awesome is correct. I mean, you'll see it. Because we, remember, the Old English, there's some it's not really mistranslations, just that they use words differently than we do. You're going to see that word terrible in other things. But always speaking about prophecy, he saw this beast that was terrible. And when you see that, you're thinking terrible, Gerar. Ivan the Terrible, right. In this instance, he would say something like, I saw this beast that was awesome. So you're seeing that doesn't mean good or bad, it means, whoo. So keep that in the back of your head as we're...
King James English was awesome. I don't think that word.
No, I don't think awesome dude would have, Okay, so 32, this image, the image's head, was of fine gold, its chest and arms of silver, its belly and thighs of bronze, its legs of iron, its feet partly of iron and partly of clay. How many things do you count there? Do you see 4 or do you see 5? Okay. Because when you get down to the end, you're seeing the iron, and then you're seeing the iron with clay. So keep 5 in your mind, okay? Now, this statue here that we're talking about, it's talking about, I told you about that times of the Gentiles, when it started to overrun Jerusalem. Luke 21:23 and 24, 2 verses. But woe to those who are pregnant and to those who are nursing babies in those days. For there will be great distress in the land and wrath upon this people. And they will fall by the edge of the sword and will be led away captive into all nations. And Jerusalem will be trampled by Gentiles until the times of the Gentiles are fulfilled. Nebuchadnezzar started this. Hosea 3, 4 and 5. For the children of Israel shall abide many days without a king or prince, without sacrifice or sacred pillar, without ephod or teraphim. Afterward, the children of Israel shall return and seek the Lord their God and David their king, and they shall fear the Lord and his goodness in the latter days. That's from Hosea. Okay? Now that was the times of the Gentiles. You need to understand another phrase that gets kind of screwed up, crossed over with this, okay? The fullness of the Gentiles. It's different. Luke 19:42 until Romans 11:25 is this fullness of the Gentiles. In Luke 19:42, Jesus comes in and he says, Jerusalem, Jerusalem, how I would have loved to gather you together as a hen gathers her chicks. But because you didn't recognize this thy day, your eyes will be blinded. They'll be darkened. That was the day that Israel had blindness fall over their eyes, because they didn't recognize that day. And if you remember, that's the day we'll be studying later on from Daniel 9, 24, 25, 26. And it's because he's saying, you should have known this. Sir Robert Anderson wrote a book called The Coming Prince in 1890. When he did that, he did the math to be able to catch up from that day, literally, taking into consideration leap years, taking into consideration all the times that are inside there. And it brought it current to the day that it was supposed to be there, from Daniel to when Jesus was there. And it was 173,880 days to the day. Happens to be 69 weeks of years. To the day. This is why Jesus said, you should have known this. You had the calendar. You knew what was going on. I told you it was 69 weeks.
This is thy day.
This thy day. Literally. He wasn't saying like, well, you know, around the time. It's fall. It's around now. You know, that kind of thing. It was exact. Now, it went from that day until Romans chapter 11, verse 25. And Paul said, I don't want you to be ignorant, brethren, that there is darkness, blindness have been put over Israel until the fullness of the Gentiles is complete. The fullness of the Gentiles and the time of the Gentiles is two different things. The fullness of the Gentiles is the last Gentile that accepts Christ before the rapture, and we're gone. The times of the Gentiles are when the Gentiles continually trod over Jerusalem, which the last one is the Antichrist. Paul is telling you in Romans, Luke is writing it in Luke, but they're both talking about the prophecy in Daniel. So just so that you can keep times and fullness of Gentiles separate. So when you read those, make sure you pay attention to which one, because they're different. They're not the same thing. Matter of fact, there's even a summary in James. If you wanted to write it down, I'm going to skip over it, but it's Acts 15, and it's 13 through 17, if you're making notes. I'm going to skip past that one. Okay, so when we're looking at this thing, I want you to kind of pay attention to what we're seeing here. There's an interesting order, okay? When he went down the list of the things, it was gold, silver, bronze, iron mixed with clay. There's your 5, right? Look at the interesting facts about it. First off, it's in value, it drops. So it goes down in value. It also goes down in gravity. That's strange. But look what it does. It increases in tensile strength. Gold is weak compared to iron, which is strong. But the very last one, it's iron mixed with clay. Not only is it weak, it's fragile. You can take gold, hit it with a hammer, and pretty much spread it out. Pretty malleable. You can take iron, hit it with a hammer, and you're going to vibrate like Bugs Bunny. Now, you go down and hit that iron mixed with clay, it's going to shatter like a China doll. So notice the list and how the things are there. Remember, there's not one thing in our Bible that's there on accident, not lists, not names, not anything. So when we start seeing stuff like this, it starts making you understand how the pieces fit. So we'll dive into this so that we can kind of see how this is going. Your images are going to come together here real quick. 234. You watched while a stone was cut without hands, which struck the image on its feet of iron and clay and broke them in pieces. Then the iron, the clay, the bronze, the silver, the gold were crushed together and became like chaff from the summer threshing floor. The wind carried them away so that no trace of them was found. And the stone that struck the image became a great mountain and filled the whole earth. This is the dream. Now, we'll tell you the interpretation of it before the king. Now, if you saw this dream, the statue was awesome. It was huge. And then this stone that was cut out of a mountain without hands smashes it into pieces. The wind blows it away as if it never existed. That would be pretty strange. Somebody needs to tell me what this thing is. That's why he started seeing this means something. This dream actually means something. So, I don't know how I got to that. In 37, you, O king, are a king of kings, for the God of heaven has given you a kingdom and power and strength and glory. Now, when you see that right there, you notice Daniel's actually saying, King, you are who you are because God made you who you are. You want to talk about witnessing to your neighbor and how you get rattled about talking to somebody in public? He just walked up to the king and told him, you're only the king because God made you that way. Okay? So now let's take a look at this whole statue, okay? Run down the thing real quick. This is verse 32. The image's head was of fine gold, the chest and arms of silver, its belly and thighs of bronze, its legs of iron, its feet partly of clay, partly of iron and partly of clay. So there's your statue, okay? So here's where we're at. Daniel 2:38. And wherever the children of men dwell, or the beasts of the field and the birds of the heaven, he has given them into your hand, and has made you ruler over them all. You are this head of gold. So this guy's going, all right, this interpretation's doing just fine. We're getting this started off just fine. Okay, 39. He says, but after you shall arise another kingdom, inferior to yours, then another, a third kingdom of bronze, which shall rule over all the earth. And the fourth kingdom shall be as strong as iron, inasmuch as iron breaks into pieces and shatters everything. And like iron that crushes, that kingdom will break in pieces and crush all of the others. Okay? So when you look at this, what you're seeing here is that the gold, that's the city of gold, that's Babylon. Well, then it falls to the Persians. That's when Cyrus came in. That's when Daniel walks over to Cyrus and hands him one of the Hebrew scrolls, the book of Isaiah. And he says, let me show you something. And he showed him in the book of Isaiah how God himself wrote and talked about Cyrus by name. And he said, my servant Cyrus. And Cyrus is like, wow. So he let those Jews go. And then he gave them money. He said, let me give you money to help rebuild that temple. And you know that only 50,000 of them out of all of them that there went home. They had started to get comfortable in Babylon. So they didn't want to go. So they stayed there. All right. Then the Persians now is succeeded by Greece. It was Alexander the Great. So Alexander the Great sweeps in. And now he starts conquering. And then the fourth kingdom to come in was Rome. So when you see this, all those other kingdoms, they prided themselves on things being better. They tried to make things where there was more intelligence, forward thinking. I mean, everything that was going on was something that was better. They were making life better. Everything about it was, and especially when you get down to the Persians, they would try to gather things from the other places. If there was something they saw that was good, they'd hang on to it. Hey, that's a good idea. Let's keep going. They had a plan when they would take their captives and they would split them up and send them all around their empire so that they would melt in on purpose. Not like America. So the melting pot, rather than a salad. Salad? Okay, good. I knew David would have a good food analogy. So the melting pot, really started to occur because they wanted it to be better overall. Not just, we're better, you suck, and then we beat you up. They bring them in. They want everything to be better. The thing is that Rome always prided itself on what they could destroy. Rome would come in and just smash things. They'd go in and just blast out a temple. They'd go down, instead of going in and seeing, hey, what can we use? And that's what he was talking about with iron, because he says it smashes it into pieces. So it kind of gives you the breakdown of what was going on. Even the years. See how it starts going through the years. Now remember how we were trying to decide, 4 or 5? Well, look what it is. Babylon gets taken over in 539 by the Persians. Persians get taken over by the Greeks in 332. The Greeks get taken over by the Romans in 68. Who conquers the Romans? No one. It fell from the inside. It collapsed from its decadent, self-serving lifestyle. Just collapsed. What is it? Imploded. So you start looking at this and you go, well, that's interesting, because how is that the second one? It's the Roman Empire revived. Because no one conquered it the first time. So it's still there in pieces. It's being revived. I put some verses in there, and for the iron versus clay, I put Revelation, because there's a lot of stuff in there that we're going to look at for that. Okay, 241. Whereas you saw the feet and the toes, partly of potter's clay and partly of iron, the kingdom shall be divided. Yet the strength of the iron shall be in it, just as you saw the iron mixed with ceramic clay. So when you're looking at this and you see these feet and these toes and the legs, this is the empire that we're actually seeing growing today. This is the empire. We're watching it with our very eyes. We're hearing it on the news. We're listening to it with the newspapers and radio and internet. We're watching this thing grow. See, let me show you. This is something called the Fertile Crescent. The Fertile Crescent covers the area that is right here. That is the Persian Gulf. That right there, that's Kuwait. Remember when we went in to liberate Kuwait? What was that, 1990? That's where it was. Over here, that's the Sinai Peninsula. This is the Red Sea. So the Fertile Crescent would cover all of that. This up in here, this is Turkey. This is Syria. So you've got Israel is running up along the side right here. So this is the Fertile Crescent. And the reason they call it that is because this is where Islam started growing. And I'm going to show you how the thing keeps moving along. Here's Babylon's empire. So it conquers the Assyrians. And then, remember, like we said, 539. So now, here's the Persian Empire that conquered the Babylonians. Much bigger. See how they went all the way over? You're talking about India is just on the other side. All those stands, Kazakhstan, Tajikistan, they're all right up in here. That's called the 1040 window right here. So all of this right in here is the Persian Empire, down to 332 BC. This is the Greek Empire. So now we start getting class. We get literature and art and everything down to 68 BC. Now watch this. Now, when the Alexander the Great, he was about 30. He lays down on his bed and he starts crying because there's no more lands to conquer. He went all the way into India. Remember how everywhere that they would go, they would try to assimilate, they'd try to bring more of it into their culture. Well, they started getting into some pretty ugly demonic things and it started disintegrating. So he dies. And when he dies, his 4 generals, Cassandra, Lysimachus, Seleucus, and Ptolemy, they're around him and they say, where does the empire go? And he says, give it to the strong. And he dies. In Babylon, no less. What do you think these 4 generals are going to do? You're going to start seeing a knife fight right there over the top of Alexander's body. They split it up. These are the areas that they split up. But what you notice is Seleucus and Ptolemy, they start fighting constantly. And the point of contact between those two is what? Israel. That's where these two have been fighting. So Seleucus and Ptolemy, this even boils down into when the Magi showed up. The Magi was from this side. They were from the Parthenon Empire. So when they went over to Herod and say, where is he that is born King of the Jews? They were insulting this side, because by this time Rome had taken that over. So there was constantly a battle going on. In this amount of time, there's 400 silent years that they always talk about. They're not silent. It ended in Malachi, and we didn't hear the ending of the Old Testament, beginning of the New Testament, until you start seeing John the Baptist being spoken about. No one wrote during that period. The thing is that Daniel chapter 11 details those 400 years perfectly. That's why the skeptics say Daniel was not written in 600. There's no way. It was too perfect. Daniel 11 details it too perfectly. So that's where the argument comes from. So now, the Roman Empire conquers. Now we got to make the map bigger, because they go all the way out. So in this, we're talking about this feet and toes, right? That's supposed to be revived. Well, when you start going through the people and how they've exchanged, it's an interesting description, the way that the images that are being used here. Because Rome had two legs. The statue, two legs. There was a western leg of the Roman Empire, and then there was an eastern leg. Well, what happened was this western leg, it dies off fairly quickly. Or the western leg. The eastern leg, it lasts another 1,000 years longer. Well, this right in here is where we get the Byzantine Empire, which eventually is taken over by the Ottoman Empire. And if you know anything about these guys, what we're talking about is Muslims. That's who we're talking about. Inside the garrison that they would go, and Rome would say, you're fighting for Rome now, come on. And they would train them, put them in a uniform. They were Muslim. They were a group that had descended from Esau, from Ishmael, and this is who they had consigned to fight over there. So this is who's fighting. That is a very important piece when we get to Daniel 9. So when we start talking about feet and toes, when you see this, you start seeing that these legs and these toes and these feet, it's all division. They're not one piece. They're all just kind of, well, if you take a look at this, out of this whole gray area that you've got right here, it's nearly all Muslim controlled today. Right now, the United Kingdom, it's running two different political systems. They're running the English system and they're running Sharia law. If I was a Sharia man and a Muslim man and I went and did something to a Muslim man, they would not try me in the court. They'd try me in Sharia law. That's how they're doing it. Paris, there are whole sections of the city that they've cordoned off and they say, don't go in there. If you're not Muslim, don't go in there. They're taking over. When they started to take over originally, they were stopped in Spain. Charles stopped them, and Spain wasn't going to allow them in. So now you've got the group being halted. They didn't go this far. This is where it stopped. Well, today, they're going all the way across it. And that's why when you hear the word Sharia, when you hear that kind of stuff going, this is not just a political thing. This is biblical. Because the feet and the toes are following this. Is it the Roman Empire? Absolutely, it's a Roman Empire. What was the Roman Empire made up of? Well, by the time we get down and we start seeing, well, this is what's taken off. And there's a lot of other aspects to the thing, because we know that through Zechariah 9, the Antichrist, he is an Assyrian. So all these pieces start coming together when you see what's happening today. So when you see these battles of whatever's going on, Iran over here, all of this is Muslim. This is Muslim. I don't know how far up it goes. This is Muslim in here. Obviously Muslim. This whole section in here, Muslim. And it's just moving. It's moving, it's moving. That's why this chapter is so critical, so important. It's huge. So we start looking at it. Now here's another aspect of the clay that is mingled. They will mingle with the seed of men. As you saw iron mixed with ceramic clay, they will mingle with the seed of men, but they will not adhere to one another, just as iron does not mix with clay. If you take my description of the Muslims, it fits to a certain aspect, but when you start saying, who's the they? Who's the they? If they are going to try to mix their seed with the seed of men, wouldn't it be rational to understand that it's not the seed of men? If I'm going to try to mix this seed with something that's this seed over here, they're two different seeds. This is not human. Something other than the seed of men. Now remember, we've gone over this enough times, but just as a background, Jesus said it'll be as it was in the days of Noah, so also will the coming of the Son of Man be. Matthew 24:37. So when you go back to Genesis, what was going on in the days of Noah? And it came to pass, when men began to multiply on the face of the earth, and daughters were born unto them, the sons of God, B'nai Elohim, saw the daughters of men that they were fair, and they took for themselves wives for what they choose. Remember, the sons of God, B'nai Elohim, those were the angels that fell. Those were the angels that chose to go this way. And even later on, you find another verse called Okaterion. It says that they left their first estate in Jude. They left their first estate, taking off their first estate, Okaterion. Well, it's interesting because that is the same word that is used in 2 Corinthians 5:2 for us. It says, "For in this we groan, earnestly desiring to be clothed upon with our house which is from heaven." The house which is from heaven, it's the same word, Okaterion. We are groaning to be clothed with Okaterion. That body, that spiritual supernatural. Remember it says that we'll be changed in the moment, in the twinkling of an eye? It's that Okaterion we're going to put on. Well, those angels took it off so that they could interact in this dimension. Okay? So this is kind of background for us, see what's going on. So when you see this, we understand there were giants in those days. We go through the Nephilim. We go through, there's tons of stuff. I was going to put a picture. This is how quick this stuff is coming. Peru, they found oblong skulls. And the skulls, they're starting to find everywhere. There were 6 of them found in a grave just across the border in Mexico. We found, I don't know if we found any of them here in the States, but they found a couple of them down in Peru. They're huge, and the head is kind of an oblong thing. So you look at it, it looks kind of humanoid, but very deformed. Well, this one even had hair on it. So they go back and they test it. They're coming back with the results that the DNA that's coming back, it's not human. This is scientists that are proving this. So we're starting to see these things. Why are we just now starting to see these skulls? They've been trying to ram evolution down our throats since I was in school. Who knows how far back. So, origin of species, completely incorrect. No facts to back it. So we've been pushing this. Now we're starting to get to the point where we say, you know what? That's not possible. Obviously, when we get down and look at the DNA, the guy that broke the DNA chain, he goes, well, obviously evolution isn't possible. And then he goes, but we know God didn't do it. So he says, we must have been from another galaxy that got planted here. Oh, there we go. So we're going from biogenesis, meaning evolution, skipping God, because that's ridiculous, and we're going straight to astrogenesis. So that astrogenesis will be what replaces for us that went through evolution. That's what they'll teach our kids. Well, somebody's kids, not my kids. All right? So these giants, we know there's fact. They're showing up. We've got skeletons. We've got a lot more of that than we do for evolution. So inside this, there are stories that have circulated everywhere. All these have them. Sumer, Assyria, Egypt, Incas, Mayan, Gilgamesh, Persia, Greece, India, Bolivia, South Sea Islands. The Sioux Indians have stories, the cave paintings and whatever. So you can kind of see that there's some legends about this. I added Southern California, Grand Canyon, New Mexico, Missouri, and Georgia. Those are active sites. There is a site in the Grand Canyon. It's on the north wall, 1,400 feet off the floor, 600 feet down from the top. The guy from, it was 1906, I almost forgot his name. Whatever. He was from the Smithsonian. Cataloged them, listed them, took the stuff out. Smithsonian says he never existed. All of this stuff is being snatched up so we can't find it. Yeah, conspiracies are no stranger to me, but there's proof of this stuff that's coming up. All of those things. There are stories about a cave that was found right here in Death Valley. I'm bringing these ones up because they're close to us right here. Giants were found, and it had certain garments on or whatever, and they said these skeletons that were laying there, they're 15 feet long. So these things are there. We know that this is a fact. We know it happened. Okay. Now, when we start looking at this thing and we go, how does that relate to today? So you're telling me that at some point in time, remember the toes? They're going to be mixing their seed with the seed of men. Okay, so what you're telling me is that we're going to start having fallen angels come down here and have sex with women again and produce these things. I've been reading this, studying this for a very long time. And I thought, it has to be the abductions. It has to be, because they're not going to just, it has to be something. And I'm just tooling. There's no biblical. I'm just kind of going through it. And then I thought, wait a second. Transhumanism. Transhumanism. An international, cultural, and intellectual movement with an eventual goal of fundamentally transforming the human condition by developing and making widely available technologies to greatly enhance human intellectual, physical, and psychological capacities. Man interrupting the normal biological movement, action, and functions of a human body with technology. You're seeing it everywhere. One of the biggest promotions of it we've ever seen, Don and I started watching this, it was called Futurescape. And James Woods is talking about this. And every single show that came up, he was talking about something that would advance you with this chip, with this thing, with this whatever. Okay. Well, how about this one? The Human Genome Project. All right. It was one of the great feats of exploration in history, an inward voyage of discovery, rather than an outward exploration of the planet or cosmos. An international research effort to sequence and map all of the genes of the human genome from both a physical and functional standpoint. They want to take apart the DNA strand so that they can know what does this do, what does that do, as if they were taking apart a car or something. Okay? Now, man is created by God. And whether it's the God particle that powers everything in the universe, it keeps them moving in sync without colliding. These particles are moving around the nucleus, and yet they never crash. And they say the Higgs boson was supposed to be something that they were looking for, that particle. So they had that CERN detector that covers 2 countries in Europe. And they fire these particles at just a fraction below the speed of light and crash into each other so they can see what the reactions are. And everything they keep coming up with is there's something they can't see, yet the particles are still moving. Something is moving them. Something is keeping them alive. It's God. It's in everything. And then you see the mysterious DNA particles inside living organisms that brings what cell is supposed to do what. Do you ever think of that? When a child, you watch these, one cell splits into 2, splits into 4, splits into... Have you ever thought, how does that cell know he's going to be an eyeball? They're just cells. So how would that cell know that he was an eyeball cell? How would this one know he's a toe cell or an ear cell? Because God has got the conductor in there telling him what is supposed to be happening. And they want to go in there and try to take this apart as if it was going to be that simple. They want to go in there and mess with this DNA. But if misguided men see this kind of thing, and they're seeking more, not just to understand this, but rather, why would they want to take that apart? To control it. To control the operations. To live longer, live better. To control life. How about if we could custom make our children? What if we could remove life-altering illnesses that might affect them in the future? Well, hey, that don't sound too bad. It's pretty easy to get some people on that bandwagon. Polio, smallpox. Well, we've got vaccines for those. How about Down syndrome? How about HIV? How about cancer? If we could go in there and just pluck that out, well, that sounds great. But then they start stretching a little more and saying, what if we could special order some physical characteristics? What if I could pick out an eye color? What if I could pick out a height? What if I could actually go through there and figure out how to pick out a certain IQ that they'll be? How about the desires that they have in their life? I want to custom make this so it's all pre-programmed in there. How about even foods that they're going to like? See, all of this stuff is what man thinks he's going to start doing when he takes this apart. How about if you even had the ability to enhance your child after birth? Not before. How about after birth? What if you could enhance your child? What if you could make him smarter or stronger? What if you went into the counselor and the counselor said, well, he's a little lacking in this area, or he went out for sports and he didn't do so good at track, and you were able to do something to enhance him so that he could, be better. Or if you had the ability to know the thoughts and the intentions of not just your child, but of people that are around you. Do you know that everything that I just said right there, they're doing it today? Everything I just told you right there, they've done it at some point. These Google glasses, they're starting to get this kind of thing where it's tapped in, where it's reading brain. Have you watched them where they have something attached to them and their thinking process operates a computer? They're having people that have amputated limbs have a robotic limb, and the thinking process moves the robotic limb. They've even done it where it was across the internet, so the robotic arm in another area moved when he thought what it was going to do. They're tapping into all this kind of stuff. Now, mechanically, technologically, it is possible to replace every single part of the human being, even the heart. They've got a mechanical heart. They're working on a heart that is actually made out of a jellyfish, because the jellyfish has the same kind of a function like a heart does to push things out. All of that can be duplicated except the spirit and the soul, because that's who we really are. And they can't do it. Biologically, we're manipulating DNA. We're eliminating certain strands. We go in there and we just pluck one of them out. But we're also adding in additional DNA strands from the outside. We're not just cloning. Remember Dolly? It all started with Dolly, the sheep. Well, then all of a sudden, remember the stem cell research, and everybody was having a cow, and there's a big old problem, and oh my gosh. Well, that was just America that stopped. They kept going in other countries. Not only are we cloning human beings, we're hybridizing human beings. Now we're hybridizing them with animals. They've done it. They've already put it out. There's a mouse walking around with a human ear growing off of him. Does this remind you of that movie, The Island of Dr. Moreau? It's sick, it's twisted, but it's man trying to play God. See, when you start looking at this, they're trying to create a better human. What if I had the eyes of a cat? Or what if I could smell things far away like a dog? What if I could be the strength of a tiger? What if I could, well, if you could get that, if I could put that tiger DNA in there, and then I put that other DNA in there, and I put, all of a sudden, I'm going to look like me, but I'm going to have these, isn't that what all these movies that are starting to come out are? Some kind of supernatural thing that you've got? Alphas, other people, tomorrow people. What's the other one? Almost human. We're flooded with this stuff. The reason that we're flooded with it is for the same reason that I told you that we're being flooded with violence. Because the more and more and more you hear about chop somebody in pieces, and I tell you this king's going to chop him in pieces, it doesn't affect you. You gotta chop him in pieces. The more you see this stuff in the television, the more this stuff right here is going to be whatever. It's not whatever. Because what we're reading right here is men that are open and willing to be used in this aspect. Genesis 6, it's a guarantee. Think about it. If somebody demonically was able to say, we can accomplish that for you, splice this DNA in, does it necessarily have to be a sexual act like it did in Genesis? Not necessarily, not today. So we would start having them. There are even kids now that are being born called star children. You're finding children talking at 2 weeks. You're finding a kid that graduated summa cum laude at 12. And you sit and have a conversation with him. How far is this going to go? He's 27 and he's on his like 5th or 6th doctorate. So where does this come from? This hybridization, it's already in effect. It's already been happening. We have no idea how this stuff has been, how long it's been going on. But yet, here it is. So, we've got to take a look and we've got to pay attention to what's happening. So we read verses like this. This isn't in the far future. This is now. It's already happening. The clay, the seed not mixing with the seed of men, it's already happening. This is not in the future. This is now. 50 years ago, it would have been science fiction. I would have been thrown out of a church for preaching something like that. Today, it's happening. It's a fact.
What iron and clay is the description of today's unstable global community.
That's what they want to say, except for the fact that when you go and it says, they tried to mix their seed with the seed of men. The global community, they're all men. That interpretation you're reading is an interpretation of somebody that won't reach out and read the Bible for what it says. Do I think that there is unstableness? Yes, that was my first interpretation. The toes, the feet, the legs, yeah, all that, absolutely. But when it says, they tried to mix their seed with the seed of men, there's no other way you can explain that. It's something other than the seed of men. And it's consistent. And we are a generation now that's starting to grasp this and really starting to understand this. This is where we're pushing aside churchianity and we're saying, what does the Bible say? Because we're heading into a time that's the latter days. In one of the parts he says, Daniel, seal up these words until the last days when men will be running to and fro and knowledge will increase. Are we increasing in knowledge? Absolutely. Biblical knowledge is what it's talking about. We're cracking this open now and we're going, it's already here. What's going to happen to the people that are churchianity, that are still following, saying, that's not possible, that's not possible, that's not possible? They will be deceived by signs and wonders. Because they're not looking at this going, absolutely it's possible. It's part of our shield of faith. All right, here, let's wrap it up real quick. 44, and in the days of these kings, the God of heaven will set up a kingdom which shall never be destroyed, and the kingdom shall not be left to other people. It shall break in pieces and consume all these kingdoms, and it shall stand forever. Inasmuch as you saw that stone that was cut out of the mountain without hands, and that it broke in pieces the iron, the bronze, the clay, the silver, the gold, the great God has made known to the king what will come to pass after this. The dream is certain, its interpretation is true. That stone that was cut out of hands is Jesus. He said, you build your house on the rock. And that stone that's going to come down and crush, it's going to come down when? At the end of the 7-year tribulation period. And what does it do? It decimates everything that's there. And what happens? A kingdom is set up. And what happens? It goes throughout the whole world. So, as you go through this, you're going to find people that try to make this last verse something that is like the kingdom now. Here's where the kingdom is. It's not possible. Jesus showed up the first time and he didn't destroy. He didn't get rid of the Roman Empire. So this is definitely something that is going to happen after that 7 years. 26. Then the king Nebuchadnezzar fell on his face, prostrate before Daniel, and commanded that they should present an offering and incense to him. The king answered Daniel and said, truly your God is the God of gods, and the Lord of kings, and the revealer of secrets, since you could reveal this secret. Then the king promoted Daniel and gave him many great gifts, and he made him ruler over the whole province of Babylon. What? A 21-year-old Jewish boy? A captive? And suddenly he made him ruler over the whole province of Babylon, and chief administrator over the wise men of Babylon. So now the ones that were smarter than him are under him. Oh yeah, remember, they already started chopping up the other ones. So now these guys that were born Babylon, now this Jewish is going to be over the top of them. Also, Daniel petitioned the king, and he set Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego over the affairs of the province of Babylon. You don't forget your friends. But Daniel sat in the gate of the king. So this man right here just made an incredible journey. And it was awesome what he did, what he saw. His courage to stand up to this was incredible, but God met his courage with accuracy. And he said, let me tell you what's going on. And if you notice this king, this guy was no joke. He'd won battles. This guy was not some kind of an inferior, weak guy. And he sees all this and he says, no, Daniel, your God is a God. Now, how long is that going to stick? We're going to watch. But that statue right there breaks down much of prophecy. So if you use that as the framework, and you start hanging all the other prophetic things that we go over on it, prophecy for you will be understood. Then all you're doing is watching what's going on around you, which means Jesus said, can't you tell the sky is red? You know what time it is? You're going to know these things and be able to apply the things of today to the things that we're reading in the Bible. And what does it do? It removes fear. You're going to have faith.
So if you don't mind me saying, the fact that what I've just been told is that Daniel's prophecy or Daniel's interpretation to the king foretold the destruction of each of the nations in the biblical terms of Babylon, Rome, and so on and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
So he predicted, based off of God's word, that this is what's going to transpire.
Yes.
That's pretty impressive because it's, not to say it is, I think that's a very understatement on Daniel's part, on the fact that he was able to predict that.
Yep.
Make it prophesied. But why would he stop again? Why would he stop? I mean, we talk about Roman imploding, or
Right, right.
Roman stopped because it just fell apart. Why did it stop there only over the colors, over the metals, gold, bronze,
Right.
silver, bronze, iron, and
Right.
iron and clay?
Because he stops at the iron, and right there he takes a break and he goes, just as much as iron smashes things to pieces, because that's what Rome did, smashed a bunch of things to pieces. And then he says there was iron mixed with clay. So the first one never disappeared. So the second one revived where he ended the other one. And then he keeps going until the big rock comes down, smashes them all, and fills the entire world. It's a complete timeline all the way to the end of the millennium. So the gap here that we're looking at is the one that goes the iron, and then the iron mixed with clay. And because there's no definite end and definite beginning, because he never got conquered, it just fizzled out. Well, this one will slowly get put together.
But could you say that we built again, back up from the iron,
I think so.
the bronze, back up to the silver?
I think so. The problem is that so many folks have tried to put this thing with the Holy Roman Empire that every time you saw a couple European nations get together, there was a while there that Don and I would sit there and listen to people, and it went 6, and it went 7. Every time a nation would join, and there's already been 3 names for it. It was the European Union, it was the Commonwealth, it was the European Prosperity something. Well, every time a couple nations would come together, the church would just catch on fire. Oh, there's 8. There's 8, as if it was a birthday. Oh, there's 9, there's 9. And then we kept going, and then we kept going. And when it got to 10, oh my gosh. But then all of a sudden, 4 more came on, and you're going, oh my gosh, there's 14 toes. And there are 14 toes on 1 foot. Because the eastern side had none. So that, boiling it down in this American 20th century thinking that we've got, is misguiding us. For example, when they go, oh, well, Gog and Magog, well, that's Russia. No, it is all of the Islamic. But yet, for example, when you see Syria right now, Islamic, right? Where's their muscles? Russia. So it is Russia, but it's not Russia. It's the Muslims that have Russia's power pushing them to do what they need to do. So when you see these things, you take a look, understand, Muslim and Jewish boils down to one thing, the fighting of 2 brothers. Ishmael and Isaac, Esau and Jacob. This is not difficult to boil this down, and that's why these battles start going on. Is China involved? Absolutely. Is Russia involved? Absolutely.
Only for the support.
Exactly.
Only for the support.
Only for the support. So you're looking at a couple of things. The Roman Empire, in whatever phase it was, because it continued through the Byzantine, so you're going to see that. Will the Pope have something to do with it? Absolutely. He's right in the middle of the entire Roman Empire. Who's he cozying up to? The Muslims. He's already said, correct me if I'm wrong, he's already said that Muslims are going to heaven. Is that right? Okay. Dave chases down articles and he doesn't listen to the fluff. He tries to find a source for it, so that's why we... But anyways, you can see where Daniel 2 is important. Very important. Really cool looking statue, really cool looking graphics, but reality check, that's the framework for everything else that we'll be looking at prophecy-wise. Cool? Father, in Jesus' name, Lord, we thank you for the knowledge and wisdom that you give to us. Lord, we pray like you did to Daniel. You give us your wisdom and your knowledge, and Lord, you point us in the direction and give us the courage necessary just to speak out to kings and leaders and people that are around us to speak your word, because we know you've got our back. Just like Daniel had that courage, and you gave him an incredible task to interpret the dream that boiled down the rest of Gentile history. Lord, we thank you. Being Gentiles, that you're giving us this knowledge and you're opening up this book like you told us in 12:2. Lord, we thank you. In Jesus' name, amen.